Thank you, sir.
I call the Honourable Member Giles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'd like to begin by commending the member who has sponsored this legislation, Materia Ture. I think it is timely that the Parliament ought to look at the issues that are raised by the bill. As we've heard from her careful introductory speech, the bill would amend Section 7 of the Criminal Proceeds Recovery Act 2009, which defines whether or not an entity has unlawfully benefited from significant criminal activity. And what her amendment would do is add one subclause to that definition, and it would clarify that the Principal Act does apply to a casino, and that a casino is, for the purpose of the definition in the legislation, taken to have knowingly derived a benefit from significant criminal activity if it knew or should have known, having regard to best international practice in the detection of problem gambling and criminal activity, that the benefit is derived or likely to be derived from the proceeds of significant criminal activity. Now, the previous speaker said, well, what is this concept should have known? How can a casino be put in a position that it ought to have known that there was something dodgy about the money that it was receiving? Well, sir, the reality is this concept of ought to have known is one that's very well known to the law, and the criminal law in particular. Where an entity is put into a position of great privilege, as casinos have been in our society by legislation, then a corollary of that great privilege is that we as a Parliament should watch them closely. And if we're concerned that they might be causing social harm, or if we're concerned that they might be assisting the laundering of money in any way, then we ought to take that issue very, very seriously. And that's really the nub of the reason why my Labor colleagues and I will be supporting this legislation to Select Committee, and why I hope that national members and others will do so. Because if we don't, frankly, then the suspicion will arise, rightly or wrongly, that the casino and the gambling industries are exerting undue influence over us. And that is not there goes the Minister for Police, who starved the police of enforcement resources during her tenure, and yet we had her colleague, Mr Young, tell us just before that all was well, the police had enough resource to do their job, that enforcement in respect of casinos and otherwise was all fine. Well, if all that was true, then there'd be no harm in sending this bill to a Select Committee to hear advice, to hear submissions from the public, and to consider whether or not it was a merited measure, or whether the previous speaker is right and there are existing provisions in the law that deal with this. And that is, sir, what the purpose of Members' Day should be. Members don't have access that the executive has to expert advice, to public servants, and to all the panoply that ministers can draw on of expertise. We have to rely on our own resources in order to put measures that we think are sensible forward. There is no doubt that there is great concern in the community about the way in which casino gambling in particular is operating, and in particular the interface with organised crime and the potential to launder money through organisations such as casinos. In light of that overwhelming public concern, it behoves us not to act simply as the lapdogs of the industry, but to say to ourselves, what is the responsible thing to do in this situation? And it's absolutely clear to me, sir, and to my colleagues, that as responsible independent legislators who have a concern about ensuring, both for the sake of the public and for the industry for that matter, that everything is seen to be conducted with probity and above board, that Materia Ture's bill should go to a Select Committee, be considered by members of Parliament in a deliberative fashion, hear advice from experts, and hear submissions from the public. And if the National Party and their allies deny that opportunity to this Parliament, then simply the result will be, sir, that Members' Day is brought further into disrepute.
I call the Honourable Member Peseta Sam Lutuinga.